You're one decision away from changing your entire emotional reality forever. Most people will never make this decision. They will spend their entire lives as prisoners of their own emotions, reacting instead of responding, controlled instead of controlling, weak instead of strong. But you are not most people. You are here because you are ready to break free from the emotional chaos that has been running your life. Here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to tell you. Your emotions are either your greatest weapon or your most dangerous enemy. There is no middle ground. Every single day, your emotional responses are either building the life you want or destroying it. They are either making you stronger or making you weaker. They are either moving you toward your goals or sabotaging them completely. The most successful people in the world, the ones who seem unshakable, who perform under pressure, who never let circumstances control their actions. They all have one thing in common. They have mastered their emotional responses. They don't suppress their emotions or pretend they don't exist. They have trained themselves to use emotions as fuel instead of letting emotions use them as victims. This is not about becoming emotionless. This is about becoming emotionally intelligent, emotionally disciplined, and emotionally strong. By the time you finish this journey, you will never be the same person you are right now. You will have the tools, the systems, and the knowledge to control your emotional responses no matter what life throws at you. Chapter 1: The Emotional Prison That Controls 99% of People. Let me ask you a question that will change everything. When was the last time you reacted emotionally to something and immediately regretted it? When was the last time anger made you say something you wished you could take back? When was the last time fear stopped you from taking action you knew you should take? When was the last time anxiety hijacked your thinking and made you spiral into worst-case scenarios? If you can remember even one example, then you already understand the problem. Your emotions are controlling you instead of you controlling your emotions. And here's the shocking reality. This is happening to 99% of people every single day of their lives. They are emotional slaves and they don't even realize it. The average person experiences over 34,000 emotional reactions per day. 34,000 moments where their brain triggers an emotional response that influences their thoughts, their actions, and their decisions. Most of these reactions happen completely below the level of conscious awareness. They feel angry, so they snap at someone. They feel anxious, so they avoid taking risks. They feel frustrated, so they give up. They feel overwhelmed, so they procrastinate. They are not choosing these responses. These responses are being triggered automatically by emotional programming that was installed in their brains years ago. Think about this for a moment. If someone else was making 34,000 decisions for you every single day, decisions that affected your relationships, your career, your health, and your happiness, wouldn't you want to know about it? Wouldn't you want to take control back? That's exactly what's happening when you don't control your emotions, your past conditioning, your unconscious fears. Your automatic reactions are running your life, and you are just along for the ride. The cost of emotional weakness is devastating. Emotionally weak people destroy their relationships because they can't control their anger. They sabotage their careers because they can't handle criticism or pressure. They live in constant stress and anxiety because they let their fears run wild. They make terrible decisions because they act impulsively instead of thinking strategically. They never reach their potential because they give up the moment things get uncomfortable. But the people who have mastered emotional control, they live completely different lives. They stay calm under pressure so they make better decisions. They control their anger, so they build stronger relationships. They face their fears so they take bigger risks and achieve bigger rewards. They regulate their emotions so they think more clearly and perform at higher levels. They don't let temporary feelings dictate permanent decisions. The difference between emotional strength and emotional weakness is the difference between living as the architect of your life or living as the victim of your circumstances. The difference between being in the driver's seat or being dragged along by forces you don't understand. The difference between succeeding at the highest levels or struggling with problems that could have been avoided. Most people will never break free from this emotional prison. They will go through their entire lives believing that emotions just happen to them, that anger is normal, that anxiety is unavoidable, that fear is permanent. They will never realize that emotions are skills that can be trained, responses that can be controlled, and patterns that can be rewired. But you are about to learn something that will change everything. Your brain is not fixed. Your emotional patterns are not permanent. Your reactions are not inevitable. Everything can be changed, but only if you are willing to do the work that 99% of people will never do. Chapter 2: The Science of Emotional Hijacking. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, not to make you happy. This is the fundamental truth that explains why most people struggle with emotional control. Every time you experience an emotion, your brain is running a survival program that was designed thousands of years ago when the biggest threat to human survival was being eaten by wild animals. Here's what happens inside your brain when you experience an emotion. A stimulus triggers your amygdala, the ancient alarm system in your brain. The amygdala instantly scans for danger and decides whether you need to fight, flee, or freeze. This happens in milliseconds before your conscious mind even knows what's happening. Once the amygdala activates, it floods your system with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, hijacking your entire nervous system. When you are in this hijacked state, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logical thinking, decision-making and impulse control, goes offline. Blood flow to this region decreases dramatically. Your ability to think rationally, to see different perspectives, to consider consequences, all of this disappears. You are literally not thinking clearly. You are operating from pure survival instinct. This is why people say things they don't mean when they're angry. This is why people make terrible decisions when they're scared. This is why people shut down when they're overwhelmed. Their higher brain functions are offline and they are operating from the most primitive part of their brain. The problem is that in modern life, most of our triggers are not actual life or death situations. Your boss criticizing your work is not a saber-toothed tiger about to kill you. Getting rejected is not a life-threatening emergency. Traffic jams are not mortal danger, but your brain treats them exactly the same way. Your amygdala cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. It responds to emotional triggers the same way it would respond to physical danger. This means that every time you get triggered emotionally, your brain is essentially having a false alarm. It's activating an emergency response system for situations that don't require emergency responses. It's like having a smoke detector that goes off every time you cook dinner. The alarm is loud, it's disruptive, and it's completely unnecessary. But here's where it gets worse. Every time your brain goes through this hijacking process, it strengthens the neural pathways that created it. Your brain literally rewires itself to make the same reaction more likely in the future. This is why people who get angry easily continue to get angry easily. This is why anxious people become more anxious over time. This is why emotional patterns seem to get stronger instead of weaker. Neuroscientists call this the neuroplasticity principle. Your brain physically changes based on your repeated thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Every emotional reaction you have is literally carving deeper grooves in your brain, making those reactions more automatic and more powerful. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your experience. And most people are unknowingly training their brains to become more emotionally reactive, not less. The average person experiences their first emotional hijacking of the day within 17 minutes of waking up. They check their phone, see something that triggers them, and before they've even gotten out of bed, their nervous system is already flooded with stress hormones. They start the day in a reactive state, and that reactive state influences every interaction, every decision, and every experience they have for the rest of the day. Most people live in a constant state of low-level emotional reactivity. Their nervous systems are chronically dysregulated. They are always slightly on edge, always ready to be triggered, always operating from survival mode instead of growth mode. They think this is normal. They think this is just how life feels. They have no idea that there is a completely different way to experience reality. But here's the revolutionary truth that changes everything. If your brain can be trained to become more reactive, it can also be trained to become less reactive. If neuroplasticity works against you when you practice emotional reactivity, it also works for you when you practice emotional control. You can literally rewire your brain to become calmer, more resilient, and more emotionally intelligent. The key is understanding that emotions are not permanent states. They are temporary neurochemical events. They last between 90 seconds and 20 minutes in your body before they naturally dissipate. The only reason emotions seem to last longer than that is because we keep re-triggering them with our thoughts. We tell ourselves stories about why we should be angry, why we should be scared, why we should be upset. And those stories keep the emotional cycle going. When you understand the science of emotional hijacking, everything changes. You realize that you are not your emotions. You are the observer of your emotions. You are not the victim of your brain's survival programming. You are the trainer of your brain's responses. You are not powerless against emotional reactions. You have the ability to consciously rewire your neural patterns and create new emotional habits. Chapter 3. The Neuroplasticity Revolution. Your brain is the most powerful learning machine in the universe. It has the ability to completely rewire itself based on your experiences, your thoughts, and your behaviors. This is called neuroplasticity, and it is the key to emotional transformation. Most people think their personality is fixed. Their emotional patterns are permanent and their reactions are just part of who they are. This is completely false. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every behavior you repeat is physically changing your brain structure. Scientists can now measure these changes with brain imaging technology. They can literally see the brain rewiring itself in real time. Areas of the brain that get used more often become thicker and more developed. Areas that get used less often become thinner and weaker. Your brain is constantly rebuilding itself based on how you use it. This means that people who practice emotional control literally have different brain structures than people who don't. Their prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for self-regulation and impulse control, is thicker and more developed. Their amygdala, the area responsible for fear and reactivity, is smaller and less active. They have stronger connections between the rational parts of their brain and the emotional parts of their brain. They have physically trained their brains to be more emotionally intelligent. The most groundbreaking research in neuroscience shows that you can change your brain at any age. It was once believed that the adult brain was fixed and unchangeable. We now know this is completely wrong. A 70-year-old person can rewire their emotional patterns just as effectively as a 20-year-old person. The brain remains plastic throughout your entire life. You always have the ability to create new neural pathways and weaken old ones. Here's how the rewiring process works. Every time you practice a new emotional response, you are creating a new neural pathway in your brain. At first, this pathway is weak and hard to access. It requires conscious effort and attention to activate it. Meanwhile, your old emotional patterns have strong, well-developed neural pathways. They are like highways in your brain. They are easy to access and require no conscious effort to activate. But every time you choose the new response instead of the old response, you are strengthening the new pathway and weakening the old pathway. The new pathway becomes easier to access. The old pathway becomes harder to access. Eventually, the new response becomes as automatic as the old response used to be. This is how you literally rewire your emotional programming. The key is understanding that this process requires repetition and consistency. You cannot rewire decades of emotional conditioning with a few positive thoughts. You cannot undo years of reactive patterns with one meditation session. Neuroplasticity works through sustained practice over time. You have to be willing to consciously choose different responses thousands of times before they become automatic. Most people give up too early in this process. They try to change their emotional patterns for a few days or a few weeks. And when they don't see immediate results, they assume it's not working. They don't understand that they are literally rewiring their brains and that rewiring takes time. They expect instant transformation, but neuroplasticity works on a different timeline. Research shows that it takes approximately 66 days of consistent practice to create a new automatic habit. For emotional patterns, which are deeper and more complex than simple behaviors, it can take 90 days or more. But the people who stick with it for the full duration experience complete transformation. They literally become different people with different emotional responses and different neural patterns. The most powerful aspect of neuroplasticity is that your brain doesn't know the difference between real experience and vividly imagined experience. This means you can rewire your emotional patterns through mental rehearsal. Every time you visualize yourself responding calmly in a triggering situation, you are strengthening the neural pathways for calm responses. Every time you mentally practice emotional control, you are training your brain to be more emotionally controlled. Professional athletes have been using this principle for decades. They visualize perfect performances thousands of times before they compete. Their brains develop the neural patterns for success before they ever step onto the field. You can do the exact same thing with emotional responses. You can mentally rehearse staying calm under pressure, responding thoughtfully to criticism, and maintaining composure in difficult situations. The scientific evidence for neuroplasticity-based emotional training is overwhelming. Studies show that people who practice emotional regulation techniques have measurable changes in their brain structure within 8 weeks. Their stress hormones decrease, their immune function improves, their sleep quality increases, and their overall emotional well-being transforms completely. But here's the most important truth about neuroplasticity. It works whether you're conscious of it or not. Right now, your brain is either rewiring itself to become more emotionally intelligent or more emotionally reactive. Every emotional experience you have is training your brain in one direction or the other. The question is not whether you will change your brain. The question is whether you will change it intentionally or accidentally. Most people are accidentally training their brains to become more reactive, more anxious, and more emotionally unstable. Every time they indulge in negative thinking, every time they allow themselves to be triggered, every time they react impulsively, they are strengthening the neural pathways for emotional weakness. But you have the opportunity to do the opposite. You can intentionally train your brain to become calmer, more resilient, and more emotionally powerful. You can use neuroplasticity as a tool for transformation instead of a force for deterioration. You can become the conscious architect of your own emotional programming. Chapter 4. The Foundation of Emotional Strength. Emotional strength is built on 4 foundational pillars that must be developed simultaneously. These are not optional skills that you can pick and choose from. They are essential capacities that work together to create unshakable emotional control. Most people try to develop emotional strength without understanding these foundations, which is why they fail. It's like trying to build a skyscraper without laying a proper foundation. It might work temporarily, but it will eventually collapse. The first pillar is emotional awareness. This is the ability to recognize what you are feeling in real time as you are feeling it. Most people have almost no emotional awareness. They go through their entire days without consciously recognizing their emotional states. They feel angry but don't realize they're angry until they've already said something they regret. They feel anxious but don't notice the anxiety until it has already affected their behavior. They feel overwhelmed but don't acknowledge the overwhelm until they're already shutting down. Emotional awareness is like having an early warning system for your emotional responses. It allows you to catch emotions when they are still small and manageable before they become overwhelming and uncontrollable. It gives you the opportunity to choose your response instead of being forced into automatic reactions. Developing emotional awareness requires training your attention to notice the subtle physical sensations that accompany emotions. Anger creates tension in your jaw and shoulders. Anxiety creates tightness in your chest and stomach. Sadness creates heaviness in your heart. Fear creates constriction in your throat. Every emotion has a unique physical signature. And when you learn to recognize these signatures, you can identify emotions before they take control. The second pillar is emotional regulation. This is the ability to influence the intensity and duration of your emotional states. It's the skill of calming yourself down when you're triggered, energizing yourself when you're depleted, and maintaining emotional equilibrium no matter what is happening around you. Emotional regulation is not about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. Suppression actually makes emotions stronger and more likely to explode later. Regulation is about experiencing emotions fully while maintaining conscious control over your responses. It's about feeling angry without becoming destructive, feeling scared without becoming paralyzed, feeling sad without becoming depressed. The most powerful emotional regulation technique is conscious breathing. Your breath is the only part of your autonomic nervous system that you can control voluntarily, and it directly influences your emotional state. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which creates feelings of calm and relaxation. When you breathe rapidly and shallowly, you activate your sympathetic nervous system, which creates feelings of stress and activation. Most people breathe unconsciously and reactively. When they get stressed, their breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which makes them more stressed. When they get anxious, their breathing becomes irregular and restricted, which makes them more anxious. They are unknowingly using their breath to amplify their negative emotions instead of regulating them. But when you learn to breathe consciously and strategically, you can literally change your emotional state in real time. You can calm yourself down in the middle of a conflict. You can energize yourself when you're feeling depleted. You can center yourself when you're feeling scattered. Your breath becomes a tool for emotional control instead of a victim of emotional chaos. The third pillar is emotional resilience. This is the ability to recover quickly from emotional setbacks and maintain your emotional strength even under prolonged stress. Resilience is not about avoiding difficult emotions. It's about experiencing difficult emotions without being permanently damaged by them. Most people have very little emotional resilience. One criticism can ruin their entire day. One rejection can shake their confidence for weeks. One failure can make them question their worth for months. They allow temporary emotional experiences to create permanent emotional damage. Emotionally resilient people experience the same difficult emotions, but they recover from them quickly. They don't let temporary setbacks create permanent emotional patterns. They understand that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent identities. They feel disappointed without becoming a disappointed person. They experience failure without becoming a failure. Building emotional resilience requires developing a growth mindset about emotions. Instead of seeing difficult emotions as problems to be avoided, you learn to see them as information to be processed and opportunities to become stronger. Instead of asking why this is happening to me, you ask what this is teaching me and how this is making me stronger. The fourth pillar is emotional intelligence in relationships. This is the ability to read and respond to other people's emotions effectively. It's the skill of creating emotional safety for others, managing emotional dynamics in groups, and using emotional understanding to build deeper connections. Most people are so focused on managing their own emotions that they completely miss the emotional states of the people around them. They are emotionally self-absorbed. They don't notice when someone is struggling, when someone needs support, or when someone is feeling uncomfortable. This creates emotional disconnection and relationship problems. Emotionally intelligent people are constantly reading the emotional temperature of their environment. They notice when someone's energy shifts, when someone becomes defensive, when someone needs encouragement. They use this information to adjust their communication style and create better emotional outcomes for everyone involved. These four pillars work together to create a foundation of emotional strength that can withstand any challenge. When you have emotional awareness, you can catch problems early. When you have emotional regulation, you can manage problems effectively. When you have emotional resilience, you can recover from problems quickly. When you have emotional intelligence in relationships, you can prevent many problems from occurring in the first place. Most people try to develop these skills randomly and inconsistently. They read a book about mindfulness and try meditation for a few days. They learn a breathing technique and use it occasionally. They practice emotional awareness when they remember to. This random approach produces random results. But when you develop these pillars systematically and simultaneously, they reinforce each other and create exponential growth in your emotional strength. Your awareness enhances your regulation. Your regulation builds your resilience. Your resilience improves your relationships. Your improved relationships create more opportunities to practice and develop all 4 skills. Chapter 5. Daily Conditioning for Emotional Mastery. Emotional mastery is not achieved through occasional practice or weekend workshops. It is built through daily conditioning that systematically strengthens your emotional muscles and rewires your automatic responses. Just like physical fitness requires consistent daily exercise, emotional fitness requires consistent daily training. Most people approach emotional development the same way they approach physical fitness. They get motivated. They try really hard for a few days or weeks. Then they give up when they don't see immediate results. They think they can develop emotional strength through occasional effort. But emotional conditioning works exactly like physical conditioning. It requires consistent daily practice over extended periods of time. The most successful approach to emotional conditioning is to create a daily emotional training protocol that becomes as automatic as brushing your teeth. This protocol should include specific practices for developing each of the 4 foundational pillars, and it should be designed to progressively challenge and strengthen your emotional capacities over time. Your daily emotional conditioning protocol should begin the moment you wake up. Before you check your phone, before you interact with other people, before the world has a chance to trigger your old emotional patterns. The first hour of your day is the most important hour for emotional conditioning because it sets the emotional tone for everything that follows. The morning emotional preparation routine starts with conscious breathing. Before you get out of bed, while your mind is still calm and clear, take 10 deep breaths and set your emotional intention for the day. Ask yourself how you want to show up emotionally. Do you want to be calm and centered? Do you want to be confident and assertive? Do you want to be open and compassionate? Set a clear intention and visualize yourself embodying that emotional state throughout the day. Next, practice emotional awareness scanning. This is a systematic process of checking in with your emotional state and identifying any tension, stress, or reactivity that might be present in your body. Start at the top of your head and slowly scan down through every part of your body, noticing any areas of tightness, discomfort, or emotional charge. When you find tension, breathe into that area and consciously release it. After your awareness scan, practice emotional visualization. This is mental rehearsal for the emotional challenges you expect to face during the day. If you have a difficult conversation scheduled, visualize yourself remaining calm and centered during that conversation. If you have a stressful presentation to give, visualize yourself feeling confident and composed. If you know you'll encounter traffic or crowds or other triggers, visualize yourself responding with patience and equanimity. The key to effective emotional visualization is to make it as vivid and detailed as possible. Don't just think about staying calm. Actually feel the sensation of calmness in your body. Don't just imagine being confident. Actually experience the feeling of confidence in your chest and shoulders. Your brain responds much more powerfully to felt experiences than to abstract concepts throughout the day. You need to implement emotional check-in practices. Set reminders on your phone to check in with your emotional state every 2 hours. When the reminder goes off, stop whatever you're doing and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where do I feel it in my body? Is this emotion serving me or limiting me? Do I need to regulate this emotion or just acknowledge it? These check-ins serve multiple purposes. They maintain your emotional awareness throughout the day. They give you opportunities to practice regulation before emotions become overwhelming. They help you identify patterns and triggers that you might otherwise miss. Most importantly, they keep your prefrontal cortex actively engaged in monitoring your emotional state instead of letting your amygdala run on autopilot. When you encounter emotional triggers during the day, you need to implement the pause and breathe protocol. The moment you feel triggered, before you react, pause and take 3 deep breaths. This pause gives your prefrontal cortex time to come back online and regain control from your amygdala. The breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system and begins the process of emotional regulation. During the pause, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? What is this emotion trying to tell me? What response would serve my long-term goals? These questions shift you from reactive mode to responsive mode. They engage your higher brain functions and give you the opportunity to choose your response instead of being controlled by automatic reactions. The evening emotional processing routine is just as important as the morning preparation routine. Before you go to sleep, you need to process and integrate the emotional experiences of the day. This prevents unprocessed emotions from accumulating in your nervous system and creating chronic stress or reactivity. Start your evening routine by reviewing the emotional challenges you faced during the day. What situations triggered you? How did you respond? What did you learn about your emotional patterns? What would you do differently next time? This review process helps you extract lessons from your emotional experiences and plan for better responses in the future. Next, practice emotional release techniques. If you accumulated any stress, tension, or negative emotions during the day, you need to consciously release them before you sleep. This can be done through progressive muscle relaxation, breathing exercises, journaling, or physical movement. The goal is to clear your emotional slate so you don't carry today's stress into tomorrow's experiences. Finally, practice gratitude and appreciation. Identify 3 things you're grateful for from the day, including at least one emotional challenge that helped you grow stronger. Gratitude rewires your brain to notice positive experiences instead of only focusing on problems and threats. It creates positive emotional states that strengthen your overall emotional resilience. This daily conditioning protocol might seem like a lot of work, but it only requires 20 to 30 minutes per day total. 10 minutes in the morning, brief check-ins throughout the day, and 10 minutes in the evening. This small investment of time creates massive returns in emotional strength, resilience, and life satisfaction. The key is consistency rather than perfection. You don't need to do every practice perfectly every day. You just need to do something every day to maintain the conditioning process. Even 5 minutes of conscious breathing is better than no practice at all. Even one emotional check-in is better than going through the entire day unconsciously. Most people underestimate how quickly daily conditioning produces results. Within just 2 weeks of consistent practice, you will notice significant improvements in your emotional awareness and regulation. Within 30 days, you will experience noticeable changes in your emotional resilience and relationship dynamics. Within 90 days, you will have completely rewired your emotional programming and established new automatic responses. The people who commit to daily emotional conditioning for a full year experience complete emotional transformation. They become completely different people with completely different emotional patterns. They develop the kind of emotional strength that allows them to stay calm under any pressure, respond thoughtfully to any challenge, and maintain their emotional equilibrium no matter what is happening around them. But you have to be willing to treat emotional conditioning as seriously as you would treat physical conditioning. You wouldn't expect to get physically fit by exercising occasionally when you feel like it. You can't expect to get emotionally fit by practicing emotional skills occasionally when you remember to. Emotional mastery requires the same level of commitment, consistency, and progressive training that physical mastery requires. Chapter 6: Advanced Emotional Regulation Techniques. Now that you understand the foundation, it's time to master the advanced techniques that separate the emotionally elite from the emotionally average. These are not basic breathing exercises or simple mindfulness practices. These are powerful neurological interventions that can instantly shift your emotional state even in the most challenging circumstances. The first advanced technique is called emotional reframing. This is the ability to consciously change the meaning you assign to emotional triggers. Most people think their emotions are caused by external events. But this is completely false. Your emotions are caused by the meaning you give to events, not the events themselves. Two people can experience the exact same situation and have completely different emotional responses based on how they interpret what happened. When someone criticizes your work, you can choose to interpret it as an attack on your worth, which will trigger anger and defensiveness, or you can choose to interpret it as valuable feedback that will help you improve, which will trigger curiosity and gratitude. The external event is identical. The emotional response is completely different based on the meaning you assign. Emotional reframing works by consciously questioning your automatic interpretations and choosing more empowering meanings. When you feel triggered, instead of accepting your first emotional response as truth, ask yourself, what else could this mean? How else could I interpret this situation? What would someone who stays emotionally strong think about this? The most powerful reframing technique is called the growth perspective. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, how is this making me stronger? Instead of seeing challenges as problems, see them as training. Instead of viewing difficult people as enemies, see them as teachers who are helping you develop emotional resilience. This shift in perspective literally changes your brain chemistry and transforms negative emotions into positive ones. The second advanced technique is called emotional anchoring. This is the process of conditioning your body to instantly access specific emotional states through physical triggers. Professional performers use this technique to instantly access confidence before going on stage. Elite athletes use it to access peak performance states before competing. You can use it to access calmness, confidence, or any other emotional state whenever you need it. Emotional anchoring works by repeatedly pairing a physical gesture with a desired emotional state until the gesture automatically triggers the emotion. Choose a specific gesture like pressing your thumb and index finger together. Every time you feel naturally confident, calm or strong, immediately make this gesture while fully experiencing the positive emotion. After several repetitions, the gesture becomes an instant trigger for that emotional state. The key to effective anchoring is intensity and repetition. You need to be in a highly emotional state when you create the anchor, and you need to repeat the process multiple times. The stronger the emotion and the more repetitions you do, the more powerful the anchor becomes. Eventually, you can trigger confidence, calmness or strength instantly just by making the gesture. The third advanced technique is called emotional transmutation. This is the ability to transform negative emotional energy into positive emotional energy without suppressing or avoiding the original emotion. Most people try to get rid of negative emotions, but this wastes tremendous energy and often makes the emotions stronger. Transmutation allows you to use the energy of negative emotions as fuel for positive action. Anger contains enormous energy that can be transmuted into determination and assertiveness. Fear contains alertness and focus that can be transmuted into preparation and strategic thinking. Frustration contains passion that can be transmuted into motivation and drive. The key is learning to separate the energy of the emotion from the destructive expression of the emotion. When you feel anger, instead of expressing it destructively or suppressing it completely, harness that energy for focused action towards your goals. When you feel fear, instead of being paralyzed or running away, use that heightened awareness to prepare more thoroughly and think more strategically. When you feel frustration, instead of giving up or lashing out, channel that intensity into even more determined effort. The fourth advanced technique is called emotional inoculation. This is the practice of deliberately exposing yourself to mild emotional challenges in order to build immunity to more severe emotional challenges. Just like physical vaccines work by exposing you to weakened versions of diseases, emotional inoculation works by exposing you to manageable versions of emotional triggers. If you struggle with criticism, deliberately seek out constructive feedback in low-stakes situations. If you struggle with rejection, deliberately put yourself in situations where rejection is possible but not devastating. If you struggle with pressure, deliberately create mild pressure situations where you can practice maintaining composure. The key to emotional inoculation is progressive overload. Start with challenges that are uncomfortable but manageable. Then gradually increase the difficulty as your emotional strength grows. Each successful experience builds confidence and resilience that carries over to more challenging situations. Every time you successfully handle an emotional challenge, you are literally rewiring your brain to be more confident in similar situations. Your nervous system learns that it can handle difficult emotions without being overwhelmed. And this creates a foundation of emotional strength that grows stronger with each challenge you overcome. Chapter 7. Conquering your emotional triggers. Every person has specific emotional triggers that instantly hijack their nervous system and throw them into reactive states. These triggers were programmed into your brain through past experiences, usually during childhood or other emotionally intense periods of your life. Most people spend their entire lives being controlled by these triggers, never realizing they have the power to completely neutralize them. The first step in conquering your triggers is identifying them with surgical precision. Most people have vague awareness of what bothers them, but they've never done the detailed analysis necessary to understand their trigger patterns. You need to become a detective of your own emotional responses, tracking exactly what situations, words, behaviors, or circumstances instantly activate your reactive programming. Create a trigger journal where you record every emotional reaction you have for 30 days. Note the specific situation, the exact trigger, your physical sensations, your emotional response, and your behavioral reaction. Look for patterns. Do you get triggered by criticism about your competence? By feeling ignored or excluded? By situations where you feel powerless or controlled? By certain tones of voice or facial expressions? Most people have between 3 and 7 core trigger categories that account for 80% of their emotional reactivity. Once you identify these core categories, you can begin the systematic process of desensitizing yourself to these triggers and installing new automatic responses. The most powerful technique for neutralizing triggers is called trigger reprocessing. This involves deliberately revisiting the original experiences that created your trigger programming and consciously rewriting the emotional memory. Most triggers are created during moments when you felt powerless, hurt, or threatened. The emotional intensity of these experiences creates strong neural pathways that get activated every time you encounter similar situations. Trigger reprocessing works by accessing the original memory while in a calm, empowered state and consciously changing your relationship to that experience. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of what happened, you see yourself as someone who survived and became stronger. Instead of focusing on the pain of the experience, you focus on the wisdom and resilience it gave you. The key is to reprocess the memory from your current adult perspective rather than from the perspective of the child or younger person who originally experienced the trauma. Your adult self has resources, understanding, and emotional strength that your younger self didn't have. When you bring this mature perspective to old wounds, you can heal them and neutralize their power over your present emotional responses. The second technique is called trigger rehearsal. This involves mentally practicing new responses to your known triggers until these new responses become automatic. Most people only practice emotional responses when they're actually triggered, which means they're practicing while their nervous system is hijacked and their higher brain functions are offline. This is like trying to learn a new skill while you're having a panic attack. Trigger rehearsal allows you to practice new responses while you're calm and centered, which means you're encoding these new patterns into your brain with full access to your higher cognitive functions. Visualize yourself encountering your specific triggers and responding with complete emotional control. See yourself staying calm when criticized, remaining confident when rejected, maintaining composure under pressure. The more vividly you can imagine these scenarios and the more intensely you can feel yourself responding with strength, the more powerful the neural encoding becomes. Your brain begins to expect these new responses and starts automatically accessing them when the actual triggers occur. The third technique is called trigger exposure therapy. This involves deliberately and gradually exposing yourself to your triggers in controlled environments where you can practice new responses. Most people avoid their triggers, which keeps them sensitive and reactive. Controlled exposure allows you to build tolerance and develop new automatic responses. Start with the mildest version of your trigger that you can handle without becoming completely overwhelmed. Practice your new response until you can maintain emotional control consistently. Then gradually increase the intensity of the trigger exposure while maintaining your new response pattern. This systematic approach builds genuine emotional immunity rather than just temporary coping skills. If your trigger is criticism, start by asking trusted friends for gentle feedback about areas where you could improve. Practice receiving this feedback with curiosity and gratitude rather than defensiveness and hurt as you build tolerance for mild criticism. Gradually expose yourself to more direct and challenging feedback while maintaining your new response pattern. The fourth technique is called trigger transformation. This involves changing your relationship to triggers from seeing them as problems to seeing them as opportunities for growth. Instead of trying to avoid triggers or minimize their impact, you learn to welcome them as chances to demonstrate your emotional strength and practice your new skills. Every time you successfully handle a trigger without being reactive, you prove to yourself that you are no longer controlled by your past programming. Every successful response builds confidence and reinforces your new identity as someone who has mastered emotional control. The triggers that once overwhelmed you become evidence of how much you've grown. This transformation in perspective is crucial because it shifts you from victim mindset to growth mindset. Instead of hoping that triggering situations won't happen, you become confident that you can handle any triggering situation that does happen. Instead of feeling anxious about potential triggers, you feel excited about opportunities to demonstrate your emotional mastery. Most people will never do the work required to neutralize their triggers. They will spend their entire lives being jerked around by their emotional programming, reacting automatically to the same situations that triggered them decades ago. But when you systematically identify, reprocess, rehearse, expose, and transform your relationship to triggers, you become truly free from your past conditioning. Chapter 8. Emotional Strength Under Extreme Pressure. True emotional strength is not tested when life is easy and comfortable. It is tested when you are under extreme pressure. When everything is falling apart, when you are facing your worst fears and most challenging circumstances. This is when most people crack emotionally and revert to their most primitive survival responses. This is also when emotionally strong people shine brightest and demonstrate their mastery. Extreme pressure situations have specific characteristics that make them especially challenging for emotional control. They typically involve high stakes, time pressure, uncertainty, multiple stresses occurring simultaneously, and limited resources or support. These conditions are designed by nature to overwhelm your prefrontal cortex and activate your most primitive fight-or-flight responses. Most people approach high-pressure situations with the hope that they won't lose control emotionally. They cross their fingers and hope their emotional strength will hold up under stress. This passive approach almost always fails because hope is not a strategy. Emotional strength under pressure requires specific preparation, specific techniques, and specific mindsets that must be developed and practiced before the pressure arrives. The first principle of pressure performance is pre-pressure conditioning. This means deliberately creating high-pressure practice scenarios where you can develop and test your emotional control skills before you need them in real situations. Most people only practice emotional control when they're calm and relaxed, which means they have no idea how their skills will perform under actual pressure. Elite performers in every field understand this principle. Navy SEALs train in environments that are more stressful than actual combat so that combat feels manageable by comparison. Olympic athletes practice under conditions that are more pressure-packed than actual competition so that competition feels routine. You need to apply the same principle to emotional training. Create deliberate practice scenarios where you voluntarily expose yourself to pressure while practicing emotional control. Set tight deadlines for important projects and practice staying calm while working under time constraints. Put yourself in challenging social situations and practice maintaining confidence despite social pressure. Take on leadership roles in difficult circumstances and practice making clear decisions despite emotional chaos around you. The second principle is pressure breathing protocols. Your breathing pattern is the first thing that changes under pressure, and it directly influences every other aspect of your emotional response. Most people breathe faster and shallower when pressure increases, which sends panic signals to their brain and escalates their stress response. Elite pressure performers use specific breathing patterns that maintain emotional control even under extreme stress. The most effective pattern is box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Exhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Then repeat. This pattern activates your parasympathetic nervous system and maintains optimal oxygen flow to your prefrontal cortex even under intense pressure. Practice box breathing until it becomes completely automatic. Then use it proactively whenever you enter high-pressure situations. Don't wait until you feel overwhelmed to start using pressure breathing. Begin the protocol as soon as you recognize that pressure is building before your nervous system has a chance to become dysregulated. The third principle is pressure mindset management. Under extreme pressure, your mind will automatically start generating worst-case scenarios, catastrophic predictions, and overwhelming assessments of everything that could go wrong. This mental chaos creates more pressure than the actual circumstances and makes emotional control nearly impossible. Pressure mindset management involves consciously directing your mental focus toward what you can control rather than what you cannot control. Solutions rather than problems, and opportunities rather than threats. Instead of thinking about everything that could go wrong, focus exclusively on the next specific action you need to take. Instead of overwhelming yourself with the magnitude of the entire challenge, break it down into immediate manageable steps. The most powerful pressure mindset technique is called tunnel focus. This involves consciously narrowing your attention to only the most essential elements of the situation while temporarily ignoring everything else. Elite athletes use tunnel focus to block out crowd noise, opponent intimidation, and performance pressure while maintaining complete focus on executing their skills under extreme pressure. Consciously narrow your focus to only what matters most in this moment. If you're giving a high-stakes presentation, focus only on connecting with your audience and delivering your key message. Block out thoughts about career consequences, audience judgments, or everything that could go wrong. If you're in a crisis situation, focus only on the immediate problem that needs to be solved and the specific actions required to solve it. The fourth principle is pressure energy management. Extreme pressure creates intense physiological arousal that most people experience as overwhelming and destructive. But this arousal contains tremendous energy that can be channeled into enhanced performance rather than emotional breakdown. The difference between pressure destroying you and pressure elevating you is how you manage this energy. Instead of trying to calm down under pressure, learn to channel pressure energy into focused intensity. Instead of trying to eliminate the physical sensations of pressure, learn to interpret them as preparation for peak performance. Instead of seeing pressure as something that weakens you, learn to see it as something that reveals your true strength. The most successful pressure performers actually seek out high-pressure situations because they've learned to use pressure energy as fuel for exceptional performance. They've conditioned their nervous systems to interpret pressure arousal as excitement rather than anxiety, as readiness rather than threat, as opportunity rather than danger. This transformation happens through repeated exposure to pressure combined with successful performance under pressure. Every time you maintain emotional control and perform well under pressure, you strengthen your nervous system's association between pressure and success. Eventually, pressure becomes a trigger for peak performance rather than a trigger for emotional breakdown. The final principle is pressure recovery protocols. Extreme pressure situations deplete your emotional and physical resources even when you handle them successfully. Most people try to immediately return to normal activities after high-pressure situations without allowing for recovery, which leaves them emotionally depleted and more vulnerable to future pressure. Develop specific protocols for recovering from high-pressure situations that restore your emotional equilibrium and replenish your energy reserves. This might include physical activity to discharge stress hormones, breathing exercises to reset your nervous system, social connection to process the experience, or solitary time to integrate what you learned. The people who consistently perform well under pressure are not those who are naturally unflappable. They are those who have systematically trained their emotional responses to pressure and developed reliable protocols for maintaining control even when everything around them is chaotic. They have transformed pressure from an enemy to an ally, from a source of breakdown to a source of breakthrough. Chapter 9. Building Unshakable Emotional Resilience. Emotional resilience is not about avoiding emotional pain or pretending that difficult experiences don't affect you. It is about developing the capacity to experience intense emotional challenges without being permanently damaged by them. It is about bouncing back stronger from setbacks instead of being broken by them. Most people have very little emotional resilience, which means that every major disappointment, rejection or failure leaves them emotionally wounded for months or years. The foundation of emotional resilience is understanding the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is the unavoidable emotional response to loss, disappointment, rejection, or failure. It is a natural and healthy reaction to difficult circumstances. Suffering is the optional mental story you tell yourself about the pain that makes it worse and keeps it going longer than necessary. When you experience rejection, the pain of disappointment is natural and temporary. The suffering comes from the stories you tell yourself. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. Nobody will ever want me. This is proof that I'm a failure. These stories transform temporary emotional pain into permanent emotional damage. They keep you stuck in victim mindset instead of allowing you to process the experience and move forward stronger. Building emotional resilience requires learning to separate pain from suffering. You allow yourself to feel the natural emotional response to difficult experiences without adding the destructive mental commentary that transforms healthy pain into toxic suffering. You experience disappointment without becoming a disappointed person. You feel rejected without concluding that you are fundamentally rejectable. The first resilience building technique is called emotional processing protocols. Instead of avoiding or suppressing difficult emotions, you develop systematic ways of experiencing them fully and extracting the wisdom they contain. Most people either try to avoid painful emotions completely or they get lost in them and never recover. Neither approach builds resilience. Emotional processing involves consciously creating time and space to feel difficult emotions completely while maintaining enough perspective to learn from them. When something difficult happens, schedule specific time to process the emotional impact. Sit quietly and allow yourself to feel whatever emotions arise without judging them or trying to change them. Notice where you feel the emotions in your body. Breathe into those areas and allow the emotions to move through you naturally. After you felt the emotions fully, engage your analytical mind to extract lessons from the experience. What did this teach you about yourself, other people, or how the world works? How did this experience reveal your strengths or highlight areas where you need to grow? How can you use this information to make better decisions or develop new skills? What opportunities might emerge from this challenge that wouldn't have existed otherwise? The second technique is called antifragile conditioning. This concept, developed by Nassim Taleb, describes systems that become stronger when stressed rather than just surviving stress. Most people aim to be resilient enough to return to their previous level of functioning after difficulties. Antifragile people use difficulties as catalysts to reach higher levels of functioning than they had before the challenge. Antifragile conditioning means actively seeking challenges that will make you stronger while avoiding challenges that will break you. It means deliberately putting yourself in situations that require you to grow, adapt, and develop new capabilities. Instead of trying to create a life without challenges, you create a life full of challenges that strengthen you. This requires developing accurate assessment of your current emotional capacity and choosing challenges that stretch you without overwhelming you. If you're currently afraid of public speaking, anti-fragile conditioning might involve joining a speaking club and gradually taking on bigger speaking challenges. If you're currently conflict avoidant, anti-fragile conditioning might involve deliberately engaging in more direct conversations about difficult topics. The key is progressive overload. The same principle used in physical training. You gradually increase the emotional demands you place on yourself as your capacity grows. Each successfully handled challenge increases your confidence and capability to handle even greater challenges. Eventually, you develop such strong emotional resilience that challenges become opportunities for growth rather than threats to your stability. The third technique is called identity strengthening through adversity. Most people allow difficult experiences to weaken their sense of identity and self-worth. They let failures make them feel like failures, rejections make them feel unwanted, and setbacks make them question their capabilities. Emotionally resilient people use difficult experiences to strengthen their identity and clarify their values. Every time you face a significant challenge and choose to respond with integrity rather than giving in to fear or anger, you strengthen your identity as someone who acts with integrity under pressure. Every time you persist through difficulties rather than giving up, you strengthen your identity as someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. Every time you treat people with kindness, even when you're struggling, you strengthen your identity as someone who maintains their values regardless of circumstances. This process transforms challenges from threats to your identity into confirmation of your character. Instead of asking "Why is this happening to me?" you ask "How is this revealing who I really am? And how is this making me into who I want to become?" Instead of seeing setbacks as evidence of weakness, you see them as opportunities to demonstrate strength. The fourth technique is called support system architecture. Emotional resilience is not just an individual characteristic. It is also a function of the relationships and communities that surround you during difficult times. Most people have very weak support systems because they've never consciously designed them or because they're too proud to ask for help when they need it. Building emotional resilience requires consciously creating relationships with people who can provide different types of support during different types of challenges. You need people who can offer practical help when you're overwhelmed, emotional support when you're struggling, honest feedback when you're confused, and inspiration when you're discouraged. But support system architecture is not just about having people to help you. It's also about being someone who provides support to others. The act of supporting others during their difficult times strengthens your own resilience by reinforcing your sense of capability, purpose, and connection. When you help others navigate challenges successfully, you build confidence in your own ability to handle future challenges. The most resilient people are not those who never face difficulties. They are those who have developed such effective systems for processing, learning from and growing through difficulties that they actually become excited when new challenges arise. They know that every challenge is an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, and more capable than they were before. Chapter 10. Mastering Emotional Dynamics in Relationships. Your emotional strength means nothing if you cannot maintain it while dealing with other people's emotions. The most challenging test of emotional control is not what you do when you're alone and calm. It's what you do when you're interacting with people who are stressed, angry, defensive, manipulative, or emotionally dysregulated. This is where most people's emotional strength completely collapses. Other people's emotions are contagious. When someone around you is angry, anxious, or upset, their emotional state automatically influences your nervous system through a process called emotional contagion. Mirror neurons in your brain unconsciously mimic the emotional expressions and body language of people around you, which creates similar emotions in your own body. This means you can start feeling angry just because someone near you is angry. Even if their anger has nothing to do with you, most people are completely unconscious of emotional contagion. They walk into a room where people are stressed and immediately feel stressed without understanding why. They spend time with anxious people and leave feeling anxious. They interact with angry people and find themselves becoming angry. They think these emotional shifts are happening to them randomly when they're actually being caused by their unconscious emotional absorption of other people's states. The first principle of relational emotional mastery is conscious emotional boundaries. This means maintaining awareness of your own emotional state while interacting with others and noticing when your emotions start shifting in response to their emotions instead of unconsciously absorbing other people's emotional states. You consciously choose which emotions to engage with and which emotions to deflect. Emotional boundaries are not walls that prevent you from connecting with others. They are filters that allow you to remain empathetic and supportive while maintaining your own emotional equilibrium. You can understand and care about someone's anger without becoming angry yourself. You can support someone who is anxious without absorbing their anxiety. You can help someone who is depressed without becoming depressed. Creating emotional boundaries requires developing what psychologists call differentiation. This is the ability to remain emotionally connected to someone while maintaining your own separate emotional identity. Most people are either completely merged with other people's emotions or completely cut off from them. Neither approach allows for healthy relationships or emotional strength. The second principle is emotional regulation modeling. When you interact with someone who is emotionally dysregulated, you have two choices. You can match their emotional state and become dysregulated yourself, which escalates the situation and makes everything worse. Or you can maintain your emotional regulation and help them return to a regulated state through your example. Emotional regulation modeling works because regulated nervous systems have a calming effect on dysregulated nervous systems. When you remain calm in the presence of someone who is upset, your regulated state provides a template for them to return to regulation. Your calm breathing influences their breathing. Your relaxed body language influences their muscle tension. Your centered energy influences their scattered energy. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about feeling whatever emotions arise in response to the situation while maintaining conscious control over how you express those emotions. You can feel frustrated with someone's behavior while speaking to them in a calm tone. You can feel disappointed with the situation while maintaining hopeful body language. The key to effective emotional modeling is authenticity combined with regulation. If you try to fake calmness while you're actually feeling chaotic inside, people will sense the incongruence and it will make them more anxious rather than less. You need to actually achieve internal regulation, not just external appearance of regulation. The third principle is strategic emotional responses. Different people and different situations require different emotional approaches for optimal outcomes. Instead of having one default emotional response to all challenging interpersonal situations, you consciously choose your emotional approach based on what will be most effective for the specific person and situation you're dealing with. Some people respond well to direct, assertive communication and will respect you more if you stand up to their aggressive behavior. Other people become more defensive when challenged directly and respond better to gentle, supportive approaches. Some situations require you to be firm and set clear boundaries. Other situations require you to be flexible and find creative compromises. Developing strategic emotional responses requires studying the people in your life and understanding what emotional approaches work best with each person. Pay attention to how different people respond when you're calm versus intense, direct versus indirect, serious versus playful. Notice what emotional approaches bring out the best in each person and what approaches trigger their worst behaviors. This is not about being manipulative or fake. It's about being emotionally intelligent enough to adjust your communication style to create the best possible outcomes for everyone involved. Just like you would adjust your vocabulary when speaking to a child versus an adult. You adjust your emotional approach when dealing with different personality types and emotional styles. The fourth principle is conflict transformation through emotional mastery. Most people see interpersonal conflict as something to avoid or win. Emotionally masterful people see conflict as an opportunity to strengthen relationships and create better understanding between people. Instead of trying to avoid conflict or dominate in conflict, they use their emotional skills to transform conflict into connection. Conflict transformation requires maintaining empathy for the other person's experience while clearly expressing your own needs and boundaries. It means being curious about why the other person is upset instead of immediately becoming defensive. It means looking for the underlying needs and values that are driving the conflict instead of just focusing on the surface-level disagreement. When someone is angry with you, instead of getting angry back or becoming defensive, get curious about what they're really upset about, what need of theirs is not being met, what value of theirs feels violated, what fear might be driving their anger. When you approach conflict with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness, you often discover that the real issue is something completely different from what you originally thought. The most powerful conflict transformation technique is called emotional Aikido. In martial arts Aikido, instead of meeting force with force, you redirect your opponent's energy in a direction that neutralizes the attack while maintaining harmony. Emotional Aikido works the same way. Instead of meeting anger with anger or defensiveness, you acknowledge the other person's emotional state and redirect their energy toward problem-solving. When someone says you never listen to me in an angry tone, instead of defending yourself or getting angry back, you might say, "It sounds like you're feeling unheard. And that's really important to me. Help me understand what I'm missing so I can listen better." This response acknowledges their emotion without accepting blame, redirects their energy from attack to explanation, and creates an opportunity for genuine understanding. Mastering emotional dynamics in relationships requires seeing every interaction as an opportunity to practice emotional strength rather than a threat to your emotional stability. Instead of hoping that other people will be easy to deal with, you develop the skills to maintain your emotional equilibrium regardless of how others are behaving. Instead of trying to control other people's emotions, you focus on managing your own emotional responses in ways that create the best possible outcomes for everyone involved. Chapter 11. The Integration Protocol for Total Emotional Mastery. Everything you have learned up to this point has been preparation for this moment. You now have all the individual skills and techniques necessary for emotional control. But having individual skills is not the same as having integrated mastery. Most people who learn emotional regulation techniques use them randomly and inconsistently. They practice breathing exercises when they remember to. They use reframing techniques occasionally when they feel like it. They work on trigger management when they're motivated. This scattered approach produces scattered results. True emotional mastery requires integration. It requires weaving all of your emotional skills into a seamless automatic system that operates whether you're thinking about it or not. It requires developing such deeply ingrained emotional patterns that you respond with strength and wisdom even in situations you've never encountered before. This is the difference between someone who knows emotional techniques and someone who has achieved emotional mastery. The integration protocol is a systematic process for combining all of your emotional skills into one unified operating system. This protocol transforms you from someone who uses emotional tools occasionally into someone who embodies emotional strength as a core part of their identity. When you complete this integration process, emotional control will no longer be something you do. It will be something you are. The first phase of integration is called skill stacking. This involves practicing multiple emotional techniques simultaneously until they reinforce each other and become automatic. Instead of using one technique at a time, you learn to layer multiple techniques together to create exponential improvements in your emotional state. When you encounter a triggering situation, instead of just using breathing techniques, you simultaneously use breathing, reframing, anchoring, and mindset management. When you face pressure, instead of just managing your thoughts, you simultaneously control your breathing, adjust your body language, reframe the situation, and activate your confidence anchors. This multi-layered approach creates much more powerful and reliable results than using single techniques in isolation. Skill stacking requires deliberate practice sessions where you intentionally combine multiple techniques while dealing with challenging scenarios. Create practice situations that require you to use breathing, reframing, anchoring, and mindset management all at the same time. Start with mild challenges and gradually increase the difficulty until you can automatically access multiple techniques even under extreme stress. The second phase is called pattern interruption mastery. This involves developing the ability to instantly recognize and interrupt any emotional pattern that doesn't serve your goals. Most people get caught up in emotional patterns before they realize what's happening. They find themselves angry, anxious, or overwhelmed before they have a chance to intervene. Pattern interruption mastery gives you the ability to catch emotional patterns the moment they begin and immediately redirect them toward more productive states. Pattern interruption works by developing exquisite sensitivity to the earliest warning signs of emotional reactivity. You learn to recognize the subtle physical sensations, breathing changes and mental shifts that occur in the first few seconds of an emotional reaction. The moment you detect these early warning signs, you automatically activate your integrated emotional control system. This requires training your attention to constantly monitor your internal state without becoming obsessed with it. You develop a background awareness that continuously scans for emotional changes while allowing you to remain fully present and engaged with whatever you're doing. This background monitoring becomes as automatic as your awareness of your physical balance when you're walking. The third phase is called contextual adaptation mastery. This involves developing the ability to automatically adjust your emotional approach based on the specific context you're in. Different situations require different emotional strategies. And true mastery means intuitively knowing which approach will be most effective in each unique situation. In high-pressure business situations, you might need to emphasize confidence, clarity, and decisive energy. In intimate personal relationships, you might need to emphasize empathy, patience, and emotional availability. In crisis situations, you might need to emphasize calm, focus, and strategic thinking. Contextual adaptation mastery means automatically shifting into the optimal emotional state for each situation without having to consciously think about it. This requires developing what psychologists call contextual intelligence. You learn to rapidly assess the emotional demands of any situation and automatically access the emotional resources that will be most effective. This assessment and adjustment process becomes so automatic that you shift into the optimal emotional state before you're even consciously aware of what the situation requires. The fourth phase is called emotional leadership integration. This involves using your emotional mastery not just for your own benefit but to elevate the emotional states of everyone around you. When you have achieved true emotional mastery, your presence automatically helps other people access better emotional states. You become a force for emotional elevation wherever you go. Emotional leadership integration means using your regulated nervous system to help regulate other people's nervous systems. Using your clarity to help others think more clearly. Using your calm to help others feel more peaceful. Using your confidence to help others feel more empowered. This is not about manipulation or control. It is about using your emotional strength to create better outcomes for everyone involved. This requires developing the ability to remain emotionally centered while actively engaging with other people's emotional states. You learn to maintain your own emotional equilibrium while simultaneously providing emotional support, guidance, and stability to others. This is the highest level of emotional skill because it requires managing multiple emotional systems at the same time. The final phase is called unconscious competence establishment. This involves practicing your integrated emotional mastery until it becomes so automatic that you don't have to think about it at all. Your emotional responses become optimized by default. You automatically respond with wisdom, strength, and clarity. Regardless of what situation you encounter, unconscious competence means your emotional system operates like a high-performance engine that runs smoothly and efficiently without conscious monitoring. You trust your emotional responses because you have trained them to be reliable. You don't second-guess your emotional reactions because you know they are based on integrated wisdom rather than primitive programming. This level of mastery typically requires 18 to 24 months of consistent deliberate practice. But once you achieve it, you have emotional skills that will serve you for the rest of your life. You become someone who can handle any emotional challenge with grace, wisdom, and strength. You become the kind of person others look to for emotional guidance and stability. Chapter 12. Emotional Leadership and Influence. When you master your own emotions, you inevitably become someone who influences the emotional states of everyone around you. This is not a choice. It is an automatic consequence of emotional mastery. People are drawn to emotional strength like metal is drawn to a magnet. They unconsciously seek out emotionally regulated people because being around them feels safe, calming, and inspiring. Most people underestimate how much their emotional state affects everyone around them. When you are anxious, you make everyone around you more anxious. When you are angry, you trigger defensiveness in others. When you are scattered, you create chaos in your environment. When you are depressed, you drain energy from everyone you encounter. Your emotional state is constantly broadcasting signals that influence the nervous systems of everyone in your proximity. But the opposite is also true. When you are calm, you help others feel more peaceful. When you are confident, you help others feel more empowered. When you are focused, you help others think more clearly. When you are positive, you elevate the energy of everyone around you. Emotional mastery gives you the ability to be a positive emotional influence instead of a negative one. Emotional leadership is not about controlling other people's emotions. It is about taking responsibility for the emotional impact you have on your environment and consciously choosing to use that impact to create better outcomes for everyone involved. It is about recognizing that your emotional state is not a private matter. It affects everyone you interact with, and therefore you have a responsibility to manage it wisely. The first principle of emotional leadership is emotional contagion mastery. As we discussed earlier, emotions are highly contagious. Most people spread their emotions unconsciously and randomly. They infect others with their anxiety, anger, frustration, or depression without realizing what they're doing. Emotional leaders spread emotions consciously and strategically. They deliberately cultivate positive emotional states and share them with everyone they encounter. Emotional contagion mastery requires developing the ability to generate specific emotional states on demand and maintain them regardless of what's happening around you. If you need to inspire confidence in your team, you learn to access and maintain genuine confidence even if you're privately feeling uncertain. If you need to create calm in a crisis situation, you learn to access and maintain genuine calm even if the situation is genuinely chaotic. This is not about being fake or suppressing your authentic emotions. It is about having such mastery over your emotional range that you can consciously choose which emotions to emphasize based on what will serve the situation best. Just like a skilled musician can play any note they choose, an emotional leader can access any emotional state they need. The second principle is emotional environment design. Your presence creates an emotional environment wherever you go. Most people create chaotic, stressful, or negative emotional environments because they have not learned to manage their own emotional output. Emotional leaders consciously design positive emotional environments that bring out the best in everyone they encounter. Emotional environment design involves paying attention to the emotional tone you create through your voice, your body language, your energy level, and your general presence. It means being intentional about whether you want to create an environment of high energy or calm focus, of serious intensity or playful creativity, of challenge or support. Different situations require different emotional environments, and emotional leaders learn to consciously create whatever environment will be most effective. In a brainstorming session, you might create an environment of open curiosity and creative energy. In a crisis meeting, you might create an environment of calm focus and decisive clarity. In a celebration, you might create an environment of joy and appreciation. The third principle is emotional conflict resolution. Most interpersonal conflicts are fundamentally emotional conflicts disguised as practical disagreements. People get upset about surface-level issues when they're really upset about deeper emotional needs that aren't being met. Traditional conflict resolution focuses on finding practical compromises, but emotional leaders address the underlying emotional dynamics that create conflicts in the first place. Emotional conflict resolution involves helping people identify and express their underlying emotional needs rather than just arguing about surface-level positions. It means creating emotional safety so that people can be vulnerable about what's really bothering them. It means helping people move from reactive emotional states into responsive emotional states where they can think clearly and find solutions. This requires developing the ability to stay emotionally regulated even when everyone around you is emotionally dysregulated. It requires having such strong emotional boundaries that you can remain centered and clear while helping others process intense emotions. It requires the wisdom to know when to be supportive and when to be challenging, when to be patient and when to be directive. The fourth principle is emotional team optimization. Every team, family, or group has an emotional culture that either helps people perform at their best or prevents them from reaching their potential. Most groups have unconscious emotional cultures that develop randomly based on the personalities and emotional patterns of the people involved. Emotional leaders consciously shape group emotional cultures to bring out the best in everyone. Emotional team optimization involves identifying what emotional states help each person perform at their highest level and creating group dynamics that support those states. Some people perform best in high-energy, competitive environments. Others perform best in calm, supportive environments. Emotional leaders learn to create flexible emotional environments that adapt to bring out the best in each individual while maintaining group cohesion. This also involves helping team members develop their own emotional skills so that they can contribute to positive group dynamics rather than detracting from them. Emotional leaders become teachers and coaches who help others develop emotional awareness, regulation, and resilience. They create cultures of emotional growth where everyone supports everyone else's emotional development. The fifth principle is emotional legacy building. Everything you do has emotional ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate interactions. The emotional states you model and encourage in others get passed on to their families, friends, and colleagues. The emotional skills you help others develop become resources they use for the rest of their lives. Emotional leaders think about the long-term emotional impact they want to have on the world. Emotional legacy building means making decisions based not just on immediate emotional outcomes, but on the lasting emotional patterns you want to create in your relationships, your family, your organization, and your community. It means asking yourself what kind of emotional culture you want to contribute to and making choices that align with that vision. This requires taking a long-term perspective on emotional influence. Instead of just trying to get through difficult situations with minimal emotional drama, you ask yourself what emotional lessons and patterns this situation could teach. Instead of just managing your own emotions, you ask yourself how you can help others develop stronger emotional skills instead of just creating temporary emotional states. You ask yourself how you can contribute to lasting emotional growth and resilience in the people around you. When you embrace emotional leadership, you transform from someone who is just trying to manage their own emotional life into someone who is actively contributing to the emotional well-being of everyone they encounter. You become a source of emotional strength, wisdom, and growth for others. You leave people feeling better about themselves and more equipped to handle their own emotional challenges after they interact with you. Chapter 13. The Lifestyle of Emotional Mastery. Emotional mastery is not a skill you use occasionally when you remember to. It is a way of life that permeates every aspect of your existence. When you achieve true emotional mastery, it becomes integrated into your identity, your relationships, your career, your health, and your daily routines. It becomes the foundation upon which you build everything else in your life. Most people compartmentalize their emotional development. They work on emotional skills during meditation sessions or therapy appointments, but they don't integrate these skills into their everyday living. They have one way of being during their personal development time and a completely different way of being during their work time, family time, and social time. This compartmentalization prevents them from achieving true mastery. The lifestyle of emotional mastery means bringing the same level of emotional awareness, regulation, and wisdom to every area of your life. It means being the same emotionally strong person. Whether you're in a high-pressure work meeting, a difficult conversation with your family, a challenging social situation, or dealing with unexpected crisis, your emotional strength becomes a consistent part of who you are rather than something you access only when you specifically focus on it. The first element of the emotional mastery lifestyle is morning emotional conditioning. How you start your day sets the emotional tone for everything that follows. Most people begin their days reactively. They wake up and immediately check their phones, exposing themselves to news, emails, and social media that trigger stress, anxiety, or scattered thinking before they've even gotten out of bed. People with emotional mastery have morning routines specifically designed to establish optimal emotional states before they engage with the world. They begin each day with practices that center them, ground them, and prepare them to respond to whatever challenges the day might bring from a place of strength rather than reactivity. Your morning emotional conditioning routine should include consciousness breathing to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Intentional visualization to prepare your mind for optimal responses to anticipated challenges. Physical movement to integrate mind-body awareness and emotional intention setting to consciously choose how you want to show up emotionally throughout the day. This morning routine doesn't have to take hours. Even 15 to 20 minutes of conscious emotional preparation can create dramatically different outcomes for your entire day. The key is consistency rather than perfection. Doing something every day to prepare yourself emotionally is far more powerful than doing intensive emotional work occasionally. The second element is workplace emotional excellence. Most people have completely different emotional patterns at work than they do in their personal lives. They may be calm and centered at home, but stressed and reactive at work. Or they may be confident and assertive at work, but insecure and passive in their personal relationships. Emotional mastery means bringing the same emotional strength to all areas of your life. Workplace emotional excellence involves using your emotional skills to enhance your professional performance. Improve your work relationships and create better outcomes for your organization. It means staying calm under pressure, communicating clearly during conflicts, making decisions from wisdom rather than emotion, and maintaining positive energy even during difficult periods. This also means using your workplace as a training ground for emotional development. Every difficult colleague becomes an opportunity to practice patience and boundary setting. Every high-pressure deadline becomes an opportunity to practice calm focus and strategic thinking. Every workplace conflict becomes an opportunity to practice emotional leadership and conflict resolution. The third element is relationship emotional mastery. Your closest relationships are where your emotional patterns are tested most intensely. It's relatively easy to maintain emotional control with strangers or acquaintances, but much more challenging to remain emotionally regulated with family members, romantic partners, and close friends who know how to trigger your deepest emotional reactions. Relationship emotional mastery means bringing your highest emotional skills to your most important relationships. It means staying curious instead of defensive when your partner is upset with you. It means maintaining compassion when your family members are going through difficult times. It means setting healthy boundaries without becoming cold or distant. It means expressing your own needs and feelings clearly without becoming aggressive or manipulative. This requires recognizing that your relationships are not just sources of support and enjoyment. They are also powerful emotional training environments that can help you develop strength, wisdom, and resilience. Every relationship challenge becomes an opportunity to practice emotional skills and deepen your mastery. The fourth element is physical emotional integration. Your emotional state and your physical state are intimately connected. Your posture affects your confidence. Your breathing affects your calmness. Your movement patterns affect your energy levels. Your sleep quality affects your emotional resilience. People with emotional mastery understand these connections and use their physical practices to support their emotional goals. Physical emotional integration means choosing exercise routines that enhance your emotional well-being rather than just your physical fitness. It means eating foods that support stable mood and clear thinking rather than just following the latest diet trends. It means creating sleep routines that restore your nervous system rather than just fitting sleep around your schedule. This also means using your body as an emotional regulation tool throughout the day. When you notice tension building, you consciously release it through breathing or movement. When you feel energy dropping, you consciously restore it through posture or breathing techniques. When you feel scattered, you consciously center yourself through grounding practices. The fifth element is continuous emotional growth. Emotional mastery is not a destination you reach and then stop developing. It is an ongoing journey of continuous refinement, deepening and expansion. There are always new emotional challenges to master, new relationships to navigate, new levels of emotional intelligence to develop. Continuous emotional growth means actively seeking out experiences that challenge your emotional skills and help you develop new capacities. It means reading books, taking courses, working with teachers, and engaging in practices that expand your emotional awareness and abilities. It means viewing every difficult emotional experience as an opportunity to become stronger and wiser. This requires maintaining a growth mindset about emotions throughout your life. Instead of thinking, "I've learned enough about emotions," you think, "What new emotional skills could I develop?" Instead of avoiding emotional challenges, you seek them out as opportunities for growth. Instead of getting comfortable with your current level of emotional ability, you continuously push yourself to develop even greater emotional mastery. The lifestyle of emotional mastery transforms every aspect of your existence. Your relationships become deeper and more satisfying because you can navigate emotional challenges with wisdom and grace. Your career becomes more successful because you can perform at your best under pressure and work effectively with all types of people. Your health improves because you're not constantly flooding your system with stress hormones. Your overall life satisfaction increases because you're not being jerked around by uncontrolled emotions. But most importantly, you become someone who contributes to the emotional well-being of everyone around you. You become a source of calm in chaotic situations, wisdom in confusing situations, and strength in difficult situations. You become the kind of person others seek out when they need emotional support or guidance. You become a living example of what's possible when someone commits to emotional mastery. Chapter 14. Advanced Scenarios and Extreme Situations. Real emotional mastery is tested not in normal circumstances but in extreme situations that push your emotional systems beyond their usual limits. These are scenarios that most people will never encounter. But if you do encounter them, they will reveal whether you have achieved true emotional mastery or just competence in normal situations. Advanced emotional mastery means being able to maintain your emotional strength even in circumstances that would break most people. Extreme situations have characteristics that make them uniquely challenging for emotional control. They typically involve multiple simultaneous stresses, life-altering consequences, moral complexity, time pressure, limited information, and circumstances that violate your normal expectations about how life works. These situations are designed by their very nature to overwhelm your cognitive and emotional resources. Most emotional training focuses on everyday challenges like workplace stress, relationship conflicts, or personal setbacks. But extreme situations require a different level of preparation and a deeper level of mastery. They require emotional skills that have been tested and refined under the most demanding circumstances possible. The first category of extreme situations is acute crisis management. These are situations where something terrible happens suddenly and you need to maintain emotional control while dealing with immediate threats to yourself or others. Natural disasters. Medical emergencies, accidents, violence or sudden loss all fall into this category. Acute crisis emotional management requires the ability to instantly access calm, clear thinking and decisive action even when your nervous system is flooded with stress hormones. It requires suppressing your natural emotional reactions temporarily in order to handle immediate practical necessities while also maintaining enough emotional awareness to process the experience appropriately later. This level of emotional control is developed through exposure training that gradually builds your tolerance for acute stress. Emergency responders, military personnel, and medical professionals develop this capacity through extensive training that simulates crisis conditions. You can develop similar capacities by deliberately exposing yourself to manageable stress situations and practicing emotional regulation under pressure. The key is learning to compartmentalize emotions when immediate action is required while maintaining the ability to process those emotions fully once the crisis has passed. This is not emotional suppression, which would be unhealthy. It is conscious emotional regulation that prioritizes immediate survival needs while ensuring that emotional processing happens at the appropriate time. The second category is prolonged adversity management. These are situations where you face ongoing challenges that last for months or years without clear resolution. Chronic illness, financial devastation, legal battles, caregiving for disabled family members, or living in dangerous environments, all require sustained emotional strength over extended periods. Prolonged adversity is more challenging than acute crisis because it requires maintaining emotional resilience when there is no clear end in sight. It requires finding ways to experience hope, meaning, and joy even while dealing with ongoing suffering. It requires managing the constant stress of uncertainty without burning out or becoming chronically depressed. This type of emotional mastery is developed through practices that build long-term resilience rather than just acute stress tolerance. Meditation, philosophical study, spiritual practices and community support become essential resources for maintaining emotional strength during prolonged difficulties. The key is learning to find stability and meaning that are independent of external circumstances. The third category is moral complexity navigation. These are situations where you must make decisions or take actions that involve significant moral ambiguity, competing values or potential harm to yourself or others. Whistleblowing situations, end-of-life decisions, custody battles, or situations where helping one person means hurting another all fall into this category. Moral complexity creates unique emotional challenges because it involves potential guilt, shame, regret, and responsibility regardless of what decision you make. These situations require maintaining emotional clarity while dealing with uncertainty about what is right, pressure from others who disagree with your choices, and the weight of knowing that your decisions will have serious consequences. This type of emotional mastery is developed through ethical reasoning practice, values, clarification work, and experience making difficult decisions in lower-stakes situations. The key is learning to access your deepest values and wisdom even when you're feeling intense emotional pressure from multiple directions. The fourth category is public scrutiny and attack management. These are situations where you become the target of public criticism, social media attacks, legal accusations or media scrutiny. Political figures, public intellectuals, business leaders and activists all face these challenges. But they can happen to anyone in our hyperconnected world. Public scrutiny creates emotional challenges that are different from private difficulties because they involve attacks on your reputation, character, and public identity. They often involve dealing with misrepresentation, false accusations, and hostility from people who don't know you personally, but have strong opinions about you based on limited information. This type of emotional mastery requires developing immunity to the opinions of people who don't matter while remaining open to legitimate feedback from people who do matter. It requires maintaining your sense of identity and self-worth even when you're being publicly criticized or misrepresented. It requires staying focused on your mission and values even when you're facing intense social pressure to change course. The fifth category is ultimate loss management. These are situations involving the death of loved ones, the end of lifelong dreams, the loss of physical or mental capabilities, or other experiences that fundamentally alter your understanding of yourself and your life. These losses cannot be fixed, overcome, or avoided through any amount of effort or skill. Ultimate loss management requires emotional skills that go beyond normal resilience and recovery. It requires the ability to find meaning, purpose, and even gratitude in the midst of genuine tragedy. It requires rebuilding your identity and your understanding of life after experiences that have shattered your previous assumptions about how things are supposed to work. This type of emotional mastery is developed through practices that connect you to sources of meaning and stability that transcend individual circumstances. Spiritual practices, philosophical study, service to others, and deep relationships become essential resources for navigating ultimate losses. The key is learning to find sources of strength and meaning that cannot be taken away by external circumstances. Mastering these extreme scenarios requires going far beyond normal emotional development. It requires developing what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the ability to emerge from difficult experiences stronger, wiser, and more resilient than you were before. It requires transforming suffering into strength, adversity into wisdom, and challenges into opportunities for deeper mastery. Most people will never face all of these extreme situations, but preparing for them develops emotional capacities that serve you in all areas of life. When you know you can handle the worst-case scenarios, normal challenges become much more manageable when you've developed emotional skills that work under extreme pressure. Everyday emotional challenges feel effortless by comparison. Chapter 15. Becoming emotionally unshakable. This is where everything you have learned comes together. This is where you transform from someone who practices emotional control into someone who embodies emotional mastery so completely that nothing can shake your inner equilibrium. This is where you become truly unshakable. Emotional unshockability is not about being emotionless or disconnected. It is about having such deep emotional stability and such refined emotional skills that you can experience the full range of human emotions without being controlled or destabilized by them. It is about being so rooted in your authentic self that external circumstances cannot push you off center. It is about having such confidence in your emotional abilities that you welcome challenges as opportunities to demonstrate your strength. Most people spend their entire lives being shaken by their emotions and circumstances. They feel confident when things are going well and insecure when things are difficult. They feel peaceful when their environment is calm and stressed. When their environment is chaotic, they feel positive when people treat them well and negative when people treat them poorly. Their emotional state is completely dependent on external factors they cannot control. Unshakable people have transcended this dependency. They have developed inner sources of strength, peace and confidence that remain stable regardless of what is happening around them. They experience difficult emotions when appropriate, but they are not controlled by those emotions. They care about external outcomes, but their sense of self-worth and inner peace are not dependent on those outcomes. This level of emotional mastery requires integrating everything you have learned into a coherent philosophy and way of being that guides every aspect of your life. It requires developing what philosophers call wisdom, the ability to see life from a perspective that transcends temporary circumstances and emotional reactions. The first pillar of unshockability is radical self-acceptance. This means accepting yourself completely as you are right now, including your emotions, your reactions, your history, and your current limitations. Most people are at war with themselves. They fight against their emotions, judge their reactions, and try to be someone different from who they are. This internal conflict creates constant emotional turbulence. Radical self-acceptance does not mean being passive about growth or accepting harmful behaviors. It means loving and accepting yourself as you are while simultaneously working to become the best version of yourself. It means treating yourself with the same compassion you would show to a good friend who is struggling. It means recognizing that you are a human being having a human experience. And that includes making mistakes, feeling difficult emotions, and facing challenges. This acceptance creates a foundation of inner peace that cannot be shaken by external criticism, failure, or rejection. When you truly accept yourself, other people's opinions lose their power to hurt you. When you recognize your own imperfections, other people's judgments cannot devastate you. When you understand that struggle is part of the human experience, difficulties cannot make you feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you. The second pillar is transcendent purpose. This means connecting your life to something larger than your personal desires, fears, and circumstances. When your identity and motivation are rooted in serving something beyond yourself, temporary setbacks and emotional challenges become much less significant. You develop the ability to endure present difficulties because you're focused on long-term contribution and meaning. Transcendent purpose provides emotional stability because it gives you a perspective that extends beyond immediate circumstances. When you're focused on contributing to your family's well-being, your community's growth, or humanity's progress, personal emotional challenges become manageable obstacles rather than overwhelming crises. You develop resilience because your mission is more important than your comfort. This purpose does not have to be grandiose or world-changing. It can be as simple as being the best parent you can be, creating beautiful art, helping people in your community, or contributing to work that makes the world slightly better. The key is connecting to something that gives your life meaning beyond your personal emotional state and immediate circumstances. The third pillar is present moment mastery. This means developing the ability to be fully present with whatever is happening right now, including difficult emotions and challenging circumstances without being overwhelmed by them. Most people live in the past or the future. They replay old hurts and failures, or they worry about potential problems and disasters. This mental time travel creates most of their emotional suffering. Present moment mastery allows you to experience life directly rather than through the filter of past conditioning or future anxiety. When you are truly present, you can respond to what is actually happening rather than reacting to your fears about what might happen or your pain about what has already happened. This presence creates natural emotional stability because you're dealing with reality rather than with mental stories about reality. This presence is developed through meditation, mindfulness practices, and conscious attention training. But it ultimately becomes a way of living where you bring full awareness and acceptance to each moment as it unfolds. You learn to find peace and stability in the present moment regardless of what that moment contains. The fourth pillar is emotional alchemy. This means developing the ability to transform any emotional experience into wisdom, strength, or compassion. Instead of seeing difficult emotions as problems to be avoided, you see them as raw materials for growth. Instead of being victimized by your emotions, you learn to use every emotional experience as an opportunity to develop greater mastery. Emotional alchemy means finding the gift in every emotional challenge. Anger teaches you about your boundaries and values. Fear teaches you about what matters to you and helps you prepare for challenges. Sadness teaches you about love and loss and connects you to the universal human experience. Anxiety teaches you about uncertainty and helps you develop faith and resilience. This alchemical perspective transforms your relationship to difficult emotions completely. Instead of trying to avoid emotional pain, you learn to extract wisdom from it. Instead of being weakened by emotional challenges, you become stronger through them. Instead of seeing emotions as obstacles to your peace, you see them as opportunities to deepen your understanding and expand your compassion. The fifth pillar is unconditional love. This means developing the capacity to love yourself and others regardless of circumstances, behaviors, or outcomes. Most people's love is conditional. They love themselves when they're successful and judge themselves when they fail. They love others when those people treat them well and withdraw their love when they're disappointed. This conditional love creates constant emotional instability. Unconditional love provides unshakable emotional stability because it is not dependent on anything that can be lost or taken away. When you love yourself unconditionally, your self-worth cannot be destroyed by failure, rejection, or criticism. When you love others unconditionally, your relationships cannot be destroyed by disappointment, conflict, or change. This does not mean accepting harmful behavior or staying in destructive relationships. It means maintaining compassion and goodwill even while setting boundaries and making difficult decisions. It means recognizing the essential worth and dignity of every person, including yourself, regardless of temporary behaviors or circumstances. When you integrate these 5 pillars completely, you become truly unshakable. You develop what ancient philosophers called equanimity, the ability to remain balanced and peaceful regardless of what life brings you. You experience the full range of human emotions without being controlled by them. You care deeply about life and people without being attached to outcomes you cannot control. This unshockability is not something you achieve and then maintain effortlessly. It is something you practice and deepen throughout your entire life. There will always be new challenges that test your emotional mastery and opportunities to develop even greater stability and wisdom. But once you taste true emotional unshockability, you will never again be willing to live at the mercy of uncontrolled emotions and external circumstances. You have now been given everything you need to achieve complete emotional mastery. You have the knowledge, the techniques, the systems, and the road map. The only question remaining is whether you will commit to the practice required to make this transformation real in your life. Most people will read this information and do nothing with it. They will remain emotional slaves for the rest of their lives. But you are not most people. You are someone who has the courage to do the work that creates real transformation. You are someone who refuses to accept emotional weakness as inevitable. You are someone who is committed to becoming the strongest, wisest, most emotionally masterful version of yourself. The journey begins now. Everything you need is within your reach. The only question is whether you will reach for